Anyone need a book on Deuteronomy? Anybody need a book on Deuteronomy? All right, here we go. There you go. All righty. You need one, Mr. Bill? All righty. Let's see. There you go. There you go. Miss Tommy, you got one? All righty. Anybody else? Oh. Brian, you said you needed one? All righty. All right. Anybody else? All right. All right. All righty. There you go. All righty. All right. So now, need one? Okay. There you go. All righty. It's good to see everybody this morning. It's good to see everybody this morning. Hope you've had a good weekend. A lot of good football yesterday. Good day to get some work done in the yard, right? Good stuff. Good times. Before we get into our Bible study this morning, if you'll pray with me, please. Heavenly Father, Lord, we are grateful for another day that you've given us and all the many blessings that we have, and just ask you, Lord, to be with us, Lord, as we go through your word this morning and the things that we cover in the opening of Deuteronomy, Lord, that we can look at the things that we'll be talking about and apply it to our lives, Lord, and help us to look at ourselves and how we can be greater servants for you and have a deeper relationship with you. Just be with all those who are going through tough times in our lives, and we ask you, Lord, to bless them and to heal them and to help them. Just help us each day to be committed to you in your Son's name. Amen. So, as we begin Deuteronomy this morning, Deuteronomy is the fifth book of Moses, and so this is where his story is going to end. And soon, and very soon, Chip will be starting Joshua with us. And so the name Deuteronomy literally means second law. This book is not the second giving of the law, so to speak, as just a remembrance of the things that's already been covered, so to speak. Largely, Deuteronomy is three big sermons that are given by Moses, and with that the crux of Deuteronomy is obey the Lord. That's what it is. This book consists chiefly of three addresses or three sermons of Moses to the people of Israel. To these are added a few words of exhortation, the Song of Moses, and then the record of his death. Matter of fact, some people look at that and they reference the fact that at the very end, how in the world can Moses when he died, write about his death, right? And so there is a lot of thought out there that at the very end of it, somebody filled in the blank on his death, and because there's a reference made to the humility of Moses, and it would be really hard to write about you having humility and have humility, and so it's kind of a catch-22 there. But that's largely what the book consists of. This book is not intended to be a supplement to the other books of the Pentateuch. Rather, it is a closing appeal from the hand of the great lawgiver for Israel to walk in obedience to the law. The authorship of Deuteronomy was Moses. The reasons for that, and us thinking that he was the author or is the author, the testimony of tradition. The author of this book was thought to be Moses as early as the time of David in 1 Kings 2 and verse 3. Secondly, the testimony of Jesus Christ and the apostles. The New Testament writers quote from the book and attribute it to Moses in Matthew 19, 7 and 8, John 5, 40 and 47, Acts 3, 22, 7, 37, and then Romans 10, 9 and 10. And so for those who believe in the deity of Christ and the inspiration of the apostles, this settles the issue of authorship. And then finally, reason number 3, the antiquity of the book attests to the Mosaic authorship. This book is quoted and alluded to by writers such as Jeremiah, such as Amos, Hosea, placing the authorship of the book years before these men. And so the antiquity of the book attests to that as well. And then finally, the 4th reason why this is a tribute to Moses being the author is that if we were to deny that he was the author or his authorship, this would basically it would force us to conclude that this book is a forgery. All right, and if we were to conclude that this book was a forgery, then why is it in God's Word? If there's a forgery in God's Word, what does it say about the rest of it? Same thing. And so really from the practical argument is that last one. And so Moses is the author here. The date of the book, accepting the Mosaic authorship of the book, it can be concluded that the book was written during Israel's encampment on the plains of Moab, shortly before the death of Moses. It was written between the 11th month and the 40th month. The 11th month of the 40th year of wilderness wandering and the death of Moses prior to Israel's entry into the land of Canaan at the end of the 40 years of wilderness wanderings, within a 30 to 40 day period. And so this is the background of Deuteronomy. Here's who our author is. Here's the idea of what it is. And this is when it's written. And so really, before we get into this first sermon, okay, that Moses is going to give, if you knew that this was it, if you knew that you had a limited amount of time left, what would you want to say to your family? What would you want to say to your wife, your kids? What are the things that you would want them to know before your time is gone? Have you ever thought about that? Would you need time to think about that? For some, probably yes. For some, probably no. I think it speaks to our relationships, correct? It's we have as parents, we have a very small window with our kids, don't we? Typically, they start to know everything at age 9, right? Okay. Typically, at age 9, they like to tell us what's right and what's not. Even Luca at age 7 is already telling us, that's not right, that's not correct. This is how we do things, and we have to remind him, you're still a little boy, Oh, can't tell him anything as a teenager. Wow. Our windows are extremely short and small. When we have with those things that we want them to know that's important. And so if I'm thinking about what's the most important thing for my family to know, for my loved ones to know, for my friends to know, if I have a limited amount of time, it's going to be the most important thing on my mind, correct? Are you going to waste any of that? Not at all. And so here we have Moses with this idea in mind. This is what Deuteronomy is going to be. This is my last chances to tell you before I'm gone, inspired by God, this is what you need to know. All right? Now, Moses had a very special relationship with God's chosen people, okay? You think about what we've covered so far. How would you describe the relationship that Moses had with the people? Not with God, but the people themselves. Is he a strong leader? He loved them. Strong leader. Do you think it's fair to say that the majority, there's always going to be some people, right? But the majority looked at him as a strong leader? Would you say the majority respected him? Would you say the majority loved him? Absolutely. And I think maybe even with that, that's where the frustration comes in when you have those relationships with people and they don't make the right decisions, right? And you're like, what? No, why can't you get it, right? You know, it's kind of like when you go through potty training with your kids. Like, why can't you get it? So with that, so with Moses here, this is where he's at. God's already told him, you know, this is what your fate is. You're not going to go in the promised land. Okay? That's because that's on you. You made that mistake, not me. All right? And so now this is what we need to let these people know, because Joshua is going to take the helm, and this is what you need to know before we go into this land. All right, so as we go through Deuteronomy, the pace of Deuteronomy is going to be faster than Numbers, faster than Leviticus. And that's because a lot of this, y'all, we've already went over. And so I don't think we need to regurgitate every single thing. Is that fair to y'all? I think we need to hit the highlights, so to speak. And so the pace is going to move a little bit faster. And so if you have questions, please ask them. Make your comments. I always love that. And then we'll go. And if our goal is to cover lesson 1 today, y'all, we might get into lesson 2. We might finish lesson 2 today. I don't know. It'll be up to the pace and up to your interaction. But then when we get to Joshua, it'll be a completely different study. All right, so introduction here into Deuteronomy to begin with. Verse 1 of chapter 1, these are the words which Moses spoke to all Israel on this side of the Jordan in the wilderness, in the plain opposite Sup, between Paran, Tophel, Laban, Hazeroth, and Disab. Is 11 days' journey from Horeb by way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. Now it came to pass in the 40th year, in the 7th month, on the first day of the month, that Moses spoke to the children of Israel according to all the Lord had given him as commandments to them. And he had killed Sihon, king of the Amorites, and dwelt in Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who dwelt at Ashtaroth in Edrei. On this side of the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moses began to explain this law, saying here, and so this is where we're at. They have just defeated these two enemies here with Sihon and Og, and so from this point, the first sermon begins, and that this is an exhortation for Israel to be obedient to the law, which God had revealed to them. And this appeal was based on what God had done for Israel. And because of that, the address is a short recap, if you will, from the period of Mount Sinai to the time when Moses is speaking. So the beginning of the journey to this point, here's the summarization of it through these 40 verses. Moses commenced by reminding Israel of God's leadership from Sinai to Kadesh. The Lord directed Israel to leave Horeb, Mount Sinai, if you will, promising to give them the land of Canaan for an inheritance in verses 6 through 8. Shortly before leaving Sinai, Moses appointed judges over Israel to help him administer God's judgment. Now, we think about that idea of sharing the responsibility of those judgments. Why was that needed? Recap question here. Why was that needed? Why did that responsibility need to be shared? So many people, y'all. So many people. Is it reasonable? Is it just reasonable from a human standpoint that one guy be able to handle all of this? You would never go to sleep. Now, how do I know that? Because people are people. And just because they're all God's people, does that mean that they're not necessarily going to have issues with one another? Buddy, we got issues with people. And people being around people, there's going to be issues. And so it wasn't reasonable that Moses would have to handle all of this. And so through the advice of his father-in-law says, hey, you got to get some help here. He's observing this. He's like, you got to get some help. And so so what happens at this point is a system is devised in which these lower level issues would be worked out by other people. Moses would simply deal with what issues? The big ones. You think about the President of the United States. Does every little thing go onto his desk? No. What things make it to his desk? The important stuff, the things that everybody else can't figure out, right? If they can't figure it out, it goes to Him. Same thing here. The big things that they cannot settle, He will handle. He'll handle that. All right, so that was able to help Moses as we would journey along. And so from that point, the journey from Horeb to Kadesh was a difficult journey through a great and terrible wilderness. Moses did not mention the problems along the way, like the fire in the camp at Taberah, the sending of quail. Upon arriving at Kadesh, the Lord gave commandment for Israel to possess the land. So here we go. This is a commandment. This is an imperative. God is saying, go take this land. An imperative, y'all, is a command, meaning can I argue with that? You think about your parents when they told you to do something. You might have wanted to argue with that, and perhaps some of us did. But what was the ramifications of that? Ultimately, did we do what they told us to do? Yes, we did. It either went the smooth way or it went the tougher way, but we still did it. And so here's an imperative here, okay? You go and you possess this land. The people feared going into the land and requested that Moses send spies into Canaan. Now, at the very onset of this is an issue. Why is this an issue? The request that they make, why is this an issue? Exactly. God tells them to take it, but their response to that command shows something. And what does it show? Trust, faith. They don't think they can do it, do they? Okay? Some of them are arguing, or maybe maybe they think they can do it, but they're just a little, there's a little bit of timidity, right? Well, I think we can do it, but let's make sure, right? Let's make sure. Let's send some people in. So from the very beginning here, here's a God from Mount Sinai that has taken care of them. He has provided for them. He has been there for them. And yet, now He says, you're here, now go get it. I'm with you. And you would think from the outside looking in, after you've went through all what you've went through, this is the easy part, right? You got here. You're out of Egypt. You got your own place. Here's God on the doorsteps of fulfilling and giving you this land. And all He says is, you go get it. And yet they say, wait a minute. Hold up. Let's go see what this looks like first. So there's a complete lack of faith by them. But as I went through this a second time looking at this, there was a question. It says here, upon the people's suggestion, Moses sent spies who brought back the report that Israel could not conquer the land. When I look back at this, I wonder to myself, and I ask myself, why did Moses even do this? Because it was he basically gives in to what they want to do, correct? Why does he even give in to that? Why doesn't he just take a stand here and say, God has given us this land. We don't need to go look what it looks like or see what's in there. We're just going to go do it. Well, they might not have done it. They might not have done it. And I wonder to myself, is this on Moses? Does Moses have any responsibility here, being in the position that he's in? Because we know, Aaron is the high priest, but Moses is kind of the political leader, so to speak. He's in that kind of form of leadership. And yet, I wonder if he just would have said, no, we ain't doing that. God told us to go in. We going in. That is true. That is true. That is true. There could be something to that as well. I just wonder. I'm sorry. Somebody said something. There you go. That could be it too. We look. It's easy for us to go back and look at what was said and what was not said and what happened and what didn't happen, and then start. It's kind of like watching a football game yesterday. Why did he not do that? Right? Why did he not roll two safeties? well, this and that, because, we know better than those guys who are making all that money, right? Uh, but it's when I go back and I read this, I wonder to myself, was there any responsibility there to bear on Moses? Why did he even give in to this? Because me, knowing how the story ends, I have the luxury of being able to say, well, if I'd have known that's how it was going to end, I just wouldn't have entertained this. Well, he didn't know that. He didn't know how this was going to end, right? He didn't know what was coming. He just knew that they had made a suggestion, and maybe from his standpoint, these hard-headed, hard-hearted people from time to time, if I just let them do this, maybe they'll be quiet and we can go ahead and get this done, and it'll be over with. And he probably didn't even think about the fact that, wait, they might come back with a different thought process here. And then when they come back and they give, the answer that the 10 spies say, hey, we can't do this. He's probably thinking to himself, why did I do this? They made that decision. They made that decision. But I wonder if Moses regretted the fact that he gave into it. But, that's hypotheticals and whatnot. So we see here that the people rebelled against the commandment of God by refusing to conquer the land of Canaan. They rebelled. And in rebellion, in sin is rebellion against God. They lacked faith. And there was a consequence for that, correct? As a judgment against the unbelievers, the Lord determined that only Caleb and Joshua, the 2 spies who tried to convince Israel that she could conquer Canaan, would be allowed to enter. When you think about that, 2 people out of 12 had enough faith to believe God and believe God's words on what they could do. You think about 2 out of 12. Does that proportion, that ratio, does that seem to happen a lot in Scripture, where you see faith and faith displayed, and then how there's a majority for some reason that doesn't have enough faith and only a couple do? They were yeah, that's right. They were two of the 12 that got to go in. And so that spoke very highly of them, because, who got to go in? Well, people that you wanted to represent you from your tribe, right? So would these have been men of great reputation amongst their groups? Yeah, absolutely. And so they get to go in. So these were men, but these 2 were the only 2 that had enough faith. And now, obviously, they're going to get to go into the promised land because of that. They're going to be rewarded for that faith. From that generation of Israel, all who were 20 years old and above were going to have to die during the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. Now, we know Moses said here that the Lord was angry with me for your sakes, recalling the Lord's judgment that he himself could not enter the land because of his sin at Meribah. He then promised that those little ones, children whom they feared would be destroyed in a battle to possess the land, would be the generation to inherit it. The generation who disbelieved or didn't have enough faith in God and what he said would perish in the wilderness. God commanded the nation to turn away from Canaan and return to the wilderness. And so here's the consequence. You don't have enough faith to take the land, then that's fine. This generation that's 20 and above that does not have enough faith, you're going to die out in the wilderness, and I'm going to give it to these children that you said would perish in these battles to take the land. That was one of the excuses, right? Okay? Well, that generation, they're going to be the ones to inherit it, not you. And so it's going to take a while to weed out that generation, 40 years. But eventually that's what's going to happen. And not only that, y'all, we know that Moses himself would not be, Moses or Aaron would not be able to go in either. And so upon hearing God's judgment, some of the Israelites, they decided to do what we decide to do sometimes, and that is we know better, correct? We know better. You know what? God, we are sorry for what we did. We're sorry for our lack of faith, but we do not agree with your assessment that we can't go take this land now. And so we know better than God. God says, don't do it. Don't go into Canaan. Don't try to take this land. And yet there was a group here that said, we can do it. And what happens to them? They failed big time. They failed big time. Wow. That attitude didn't change much, did it? The attitude didn't change much. And so with that, they would not hear, and consequently the army of Israel was defeated by the Canaanites, and Israel would stay in Kadesh for many days. That's amazing to me that we can go from having a group of people that had no faith to now we have faith, right? God says, go take it. We can't do it. God says, don't do it. Now we can go take it. Wow. This is the points where it would drive me nuts dealing with these people. That's why Moses is special, y'all, because he's got way more patience than I would have. It sounds like teenagers. Sometimes you got to do reverse psychology and take the opposite stand of what you want them to do, so that way they think the right thing to do is their decision. It works sometimes. Sometimes they can spot it out. All right. So the first sermon of Moses is an exhortation for Israel to be faithful to the covenant based on God's past conduct toward her. And chapter 1 and verses 6 through 45, there was looking at the history of Israel from Mount Sinai to the abortive attempt to conquer Canaan at Kadesh Barnea. And so with that, let's go down. After the attempt to conquer Canaan without God's help, the children of Israel turned back into the wilderness to wander for the remainder of 40 years, during which time the Lord's judgment was executed against them. After the judgment was completed, they moved to Canaan. As they came toward Edom, in chapter 2 and verses 4 through 8, the Lord forbade Israel to attack the Edomites, promising Israel that Edom would not attack her. Instead of doing battle, the Israelites were to purchase from the Edomites the necessary water and meat for their journey. God's providing for Israel in the past was the assurance that He would be with them as they journeyed around Edom. In verse 7 of chapter 2, the reason Israel could not attack the Edomites was that they were Israel's brethren. In verse 4, having descended from Esau. God had given Mount Seir to them as a possession. And then we also see when they come to the border of Moab in verses 9 through 12, again the Lord forbade Israel to touch Moab. Moab had descended from Lot. God had given Ar to the Moabites for their possession. Verses 10 through 12 relate the victory of the Moabites over the giants who had previously occupied their territory. This record of victory was inserted in Moses' sermon to assure Israel that they could be victorious over the giants who inhabited Canaan, even as the Moabites had been. And so when we look at this, we're seeing two different groups of people, the Edomites and the Moabites. And God says, do not mess with these people, okay? Do not attack these people. Now, how apprehensive would you be being in the group of God's chosen people here, and God says, don't worry about them. You know, don't mess with them, don't attack them. They ain't going to mess with you. Would you still be a little apprehensive? Of course. You know, should I trust God? Absolutely, but humans are humans sometimes. And you know, when we're looking at these groups, not every group was always nice, right? Not every group was always hospitable. Not every group was willing to help because they're looking at you and you got a pretty big group and, you know, you're getting a little close. You're getting a little too close. Are you likely to attack us when we're not ready and take what we got? You know, so there's that thought there. Or are they willing to attack us and take what we got? And so here, there's apprehension here, but God is notice that God is keeping His word, okay? He's keeping His word to these people. The judgment against the nation crossing over the brook Zered, the Israelites came to the border of the Ammonites. The judgment against the nation for their unbelief at Kadesh was complete. The men of war who lacked faith in God's ability to give Canaan to Israel for an inheritance were dead. The Lord forbade Israel to attack Ammon for the reason that the Ammonites were descended from Lot and held their land as a result of God's gift to them. Like the Moabites, the Ammonites had overthrown giants in their land to receive their land for an inheritance. As Israel approached the land of Sihon, the king of the Amorites, the Lord announced that the conquest was to begin. He promised to put the dread of the Israelites in the hearts of the inhabitants of the land. Israel sent messengers to the Amorites as they had to the Edomites and to the Moabites requesting permission to pass through their land. The Amorites refused, and Sihon came against Israel armed for battle. Israel defeated the Amorites and put to death all the inhabitants of the land. The Lord had given the land of the Amorites to Israel for an inheritance. And so through this we see God keeping His word. There were certain groups that He had given certain places as a possession out of respect to the relationship and where the descendants to Lot and to Esau. He had given that land to those people. And so He's keeping His word. He's keeping His word. But then we see that He promised to put the dread of the Israelites in the hearts of the inhabitants of the land. Why would He want to do that? When I think about that, put the dread of the Israelites into the hearts of the inhabitants. What essentially is He wanting to do? Of course. Have you ever had a sporting event in which you participated in and they had a really good player? When I was in high school, we were playing basketball. There was a guy that played for Hamilton County, and I played against him. We were both seniors, and his name was Alex Brown, and we knew who Alex Brown was because Alex Brown had signed a full scholarship to the University of Florida to play defense. He was 6'4", 250. This was a man, y'all. And guess who got to guard Alex Brown? I'm not 6'4", you can tell. And I might be getting to 250, but it ain't the way Alex Brown got to 250. This man, you could not move this guy. And I still remember playing against him to this day. And there was dread, y'all. There was dread in my heart. Because I'm just thinking, if this guy catches me with one bow, I'm done. And there was apprehension. There was fear, a little bit of fear in my heart. Matter of fact, you could say that Hamilton had that game won before we even started because of the stories that we heard. And that's what God's doing here. Okay? There's a certain thing in battle called psychological warfare in which we win the battle before the first shot's even fired. If you look at world history, y'all, there was a group of people called the Mongols. Have y'all ever heard about the Mongols? The Mongols, Genghis Khan, they amassed the largest land empire in human history. They were terrifyingly bad. The things that they would do for fun would sicken you. And they did these things, y'all, not because, let me take that back. They probably were very sadistic. But at the same time, they did this to grow the legend of who they were. They would literally tie horses, ropes to horses with a person, put 4 horses, one on each arm and leg, and they would make bets on which would be the last one to be pulled off. All right? They were horrible people. And the worst thing that you could hear at that time was the drums. When these people got close, they started beating drums. And the closer they got, the louder the drums got. And to the point to where there was two things that would happen. You either lower your gates and you let us in, and we'll take what we got, and we'll probably kill some of you, but the city will stand, and some of y'all will live. If you don't lower your gates, we burn the whole place down and we kill everybody. And so the worst thing you could hear was those drums because you knew they were coming. That's dread, y'all. That is fear. Those people were defeated before they even got to the gates. And most of the gates came down. That's what we're talking about here. God was wanting to put dread of the Israelites into the hearts of those inhabitants of Canaan. And you think about that. If you were up on those walls of Jericho and you're watching what's going on the other side of the Jordan and you're seeing all these people get destroyed, what are you thinking? Man, we got some decisions to make, don't we? So that's what he's doing here. God's building confidence in his people that they can do what he said to do. That's why you're seeing these early victories mount up. He's building confidence. And so with that, we see that in the battle, Israel defeated Og, capturing 60 cities and exterminating the people. The northern territory of Bashan was now Israel's possession. The victory over Og should reassure Israel of her ability, with God's help, to conquer the land of Canaan. Og was a giant, but even he was unable to withstand God. And so all these people that had these great reputations of being battle-hardened people or being warriors or whatever you want to call them, they have now just went down to Israel. Israel's building confidence in itself that they can do this. With confidence comes a greater faith that we can do this. They see it, and now we're getting there, and we're getting ready to. We're going to get ready to enter and to take the land that's going to be flowing with milk and honey. The land east of Jordan was divided amongst the tribes of Gad, Reuben, and half the tribe of Manasseh. We know that these three tribes, even though they requested that land on the other side of the Jordan before they entered the Promised Land, there was a deal that had to be made. They would receive that land, but what did they have to do? They had to empty it out, but also as the Israelites go in, they cross the Jordan, they go into the Promised Land, what did they still have to do? They still had to help them. They still had to, even though you got yours, you still got to go help everybody else get theirs. And so there was a fear there that if we give them this, then they're just not going to help. They got what they wanted. No, the understanding is you're going to go help regardless. And that's what would happen. At this point, Moses appoints Joshua as his successor to lead Israel into battle, reassuring him that God would be with him. And he then related his prayer that the Lord would allow him to enter the land of Canaan. Now, you think about Joshua and you think about the things that he saw and the things that he witnessed and the things that he's been through. You know, all those unfaithful people that caused the 40 years of wonder, that was rough, right? And we would look at it and we would say, you know, they deserved it, right? They deserved it. Was that fair? Does everybody agree with that statement? They deserved what they got? But you got to also remember, there were some faithful people that had to go along with that, right? There were some faithful people that would fully believe God would give them that land, and yet they still had to go wander with the unfaithful. And Joshua was one of them. He's seen everything that's going on, and he knows time's coming in which he is going to be the guy. He's going to be the political leader. He's going to take over for Moses. You know, and I wonder sometimes with him, what's he thinking here? You know, what is he thinking? Is he ready for this? Do you think some of the issues that Moses faced with these people, is he going to face those issues? And how's he going to react? And that's a lesson to us, y'all, in that the way, not only with our children, our grandchildren, but just people who watch us and people who think highly of us, they're looking to see how we react to certain situations. And what they're really doing is, based off how we react in those situations, that's the way that I think I should react in those situations, right? And so with that, Joshua was blessed because he got to watch Moses. He got to see all the great decisions that Moses made, the example, the love. We characterize Moses as, as the people had a respect for him, had a deep love for him, right? They got that came because of who Moses was and how he carried himself. Joshua got to see all the good traits of a leader, but then, y'all, he also got to see what? The mistakes. and how Moses had to learn from those mistakes. So he had the perfect template in front of him on what type of a leader that he should be, right? That's what he has. That's what he has in front of him. And so Joshua is going to. He would soon be able to take that spot. Moses related his prayer that the Lord allow him to enter the land of Canaan. Do you think it was wrong of Moses to make this prayer, to allow God, even though he's been told he's been told you can't go in, right? You can't do it. But yet Moses still prays, hey, maybe you'll change your mind. Can anyone blame Moses for that? He had done a lot of work. He had done a lot of things. From a human mind, do you think he should have been allowed to go in? I think the average human being, while looking at the story and the things he had to put up with, and the way he served, I think we would all say, yeah, man, he should be able to go in, right? He should be able to go in with them. I mean, look what he's done. And yet God says what? Ain't going to happen. And there was a reason for that, y'all. There was a reason for that. Okay? Anyone want to tell me why Moses was not allowed to go in? Why is he not allowed to go into the promised land? He did not listen to God. Dale's right. He was supposed to speak to it, and he did what? He struck it. He didn't listen to God. And so, who was perceived to have the power? Moses. If Moses was allowed to go in with that group, they would start worshiping. There was a high likelihood, y'all, that they would start looking at Moses as God and the reason they got to where they were instead of God himself. That's right. That's right. There's no favoritism, is there? Now, God loved Moses, y'all. God absolutely loved Moses. And I don't think that was an easy decision that God had to make, but he had to make it. Just like, when we look at eternity and we look at the fact that, at some point the Lord's going to come back and angels are going to divide the good from the bad, right? Do you think God's going to love the fact that he's got to send people to hell? No, not at all. Not at all. Yes, sir. That's right. That's exactly right. But also Moses being a human being, I'm sure that this nagged at him. Because it would me. I mean, I'm telling you, if I'm with you for all that time, and I've been doing my very best, and I make one bad mistake, right? And it keeps me out. I mean, I'm sorry, y'all. As a human being, that would bother me. Now, would I get over it? Yes, because I got to. But that would bother me. The Lord refused Moses' request, telling Moses, let it suffice thee, speak no more to me on this matter. That's pretty much open and shut, ain't it? Moses says, hey, you might want to consider letting me go into the promised land. Maybe it's a better day. And God says, no, don't even talk to me about this anymore. Steve. Yes. That's right. Yes. That's right. That's right. That's right. And maybe even with that, in our human minds, he got caught up in emotion, right? He was aggravated with this people, and like you just said, like Steve said, I'm going to show you, right? I'm tired of this. You want water? Here's your water, Here, once again, when we get mad, y'all, take some time and cool off before you say something that's going to hurt some feelings you didn't intend to hurt. Because once it gets out there, y'all, it's hard to bring it back. And so with that, he says, we're done with this. We're not going to talk about this anymore. And Moses, y'all, from everything that we see in Scripture, he was fine with that. He asked, it was shot down. But God says this, I can't let you go into the land, but this is what I will do. I'll let you look at it. I'll take you up to Mount Nebo, to the heights of Pisgah, and I will let you look into the land. This is God, y'all, making a concession here. He's keeping His word. He's not sacrificing His integrity. But He's saying, out of a deep love for you, I'm going to let you look. I'm going to let you see. And this right here, as Steve said, God spoke directly to Moses. He will not have that same relationship with Joshua. He will speak to the priest, and the priest will speak to Joshua. There will not be that direct one anymore. And I wondered about that. I wonder about that. You know, do you think it was the fact that that direct relationship that he had with Moses? I wonder, why did it stop with Joshua? Yes. That's right. And Joshua, y'all, for all intents and purposes, will be a good leader. And yet we'll find out. Chip will be guiding us through that study pretty soon. All right, our time is up. Thank y'all so much for your comments and your interaction today. We'll pick up in chapter 4, verses 1 through 40 next week. Thank you. If you came in late and you need a book, they're up here. Come grab it. Oh, just put it right there. That's fine.